Nothing ever happens unless you ask for it.
I'm like I was like, because we were like, gosh, why would she flake and just say nothing? Like, we had it in the calendars, like she accepted it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we had a plan for a while. It was just
hey man, clearly this was supposed to happen. So I'm rolling with it.
just for anyone listening, what happened is, I'm sure you heard this. We had a scheduled guest, and she just ghosted us. So I went into a group chat that I'm in, the man dinner, and I said, anyone want to be a guest? And I actually don't think I've ever met you.
No, not formally.
Not formally. And Tom's like, I'm down. We got a client got pushed back. Let's do it.
Yeah. Well, I'm here, guys.
Good to have you. This is awesome. All right. So we are the Social Ninjas. I am your co-host, Jeremy, and joined as always by Kyle.
What up?
And our special guest is someone I've never met before. So let me go ahead and see if you can give us a little bit of background, who you are and what you're about. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, of course, guys. My name is Thomas Edwards Jr. I've been a coach for over 11 years. I'm most known formally as the founder of the Professional Wingman, which helped thousands of people get into relationships by showing them in real time what prevented them from getting into the romantic connections that they wanted. I now work as a transformational coach, helping people live by what I call the one-up rule, which is to live life like you were given a second one. And I've worked with a lot of clients and helping elevate their happiness and their fulfillment by finding joy in everything in their lives. So that's kind of the 30-second overview of...
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. I've literally for many years been like, God, one day I just want to make an app called like the wingman, and you can like pick your wingman, and like they have like all the different ones.
Mm-hmm.
And you did it. You did it.
Yeah. It's so funny that you mentioned that, because I actually submitted that app idea as like the Uber for wingmen.
That's exactly what I thought of.
Yeah.
I'm not even joking.
No, it's true. Like it was definitely something viable, for sure. But
yes, and you got like their ratings and the style of wingman.
Exactly.
Oh,
yeah.
Man.
The incubator that I applied to didn't really think that was a viable product, but alas, here we are.
That's cool.
But yeah, man,
So
great minds.
Yeah. So you tell us a little bit about like how the process works?
Yeah. So, for the record, I retired from wingman coaching in January of 2019 after doing it for nearly 10 years. But the company still exists. You can go to theprofessionalwingman.com. Right now, we offer a self-study program that is based on all the work that I've done working with clients in person and focusing on the 8 milestones that gets them from deciding they want to be in a relationship to actually getting them there. So I'll share with you in terms of like how that worked, right? So clients would find me, or I've had the good fortune of being on a lot of media. So I've been like on TV, featuring a lot of articles around the world. And so clients would just find me and say, hey, like, I need help meeting someone in Miami. So I'd fly down and I'd work with them. And what I would do is I'd watch them interact socially, right? Without any feedback, right? I just watch and see what they're doing. And then in real time, I connect with them and say, hey, listen, like, what's going on here? And then give them specific strategies, both mindset and practical, right? In terms of like real world application across various levels, such as how to initiate conversation, how to convey interest, and how to know if that interest is being reciprocated, how to go deeper into conversation, engage in conversation. How do you actively listen? How do you segue into potentially getting a date? And then like what happens in the communication that leads to the first date? Like how do you have the first date, the second date, the third date, right? Really just ranking it down to a T so guys don't have to think so much about it, because let's face it, guys, we overthink everything, especially things that we desire, And so a lot of those times I was with them literally out in these social environments, whether it was random bars, conferences, events, social gatherings, happy hours, networking events, and really just helping them develop confidence and the skill set to communicate and create connections with people. So naturally, it went beyond just romantic relationships. It actually ended up improving everything in their lives.
Do you realize you're my spirit animal? I'm just curious. Because I'm a social coach and dating coach. That is amazing.
That's awesome.
I would take, I started with dating, but then I do enjoy just normal conversation, helping people, and I would do the same kind of thing. I would say I took a guy who has social anxiety, and I had him do like social reps called flooding, right? I like hold the space for him just to like say a certain amount of hellos, stuff like that. Yeah. So can you tell us through the process of like, what do you think holds guys back, and or in any dating, and what do you do to kind of support them through it?
Yeah. So to your point, what I would used to say. I'll give you my canned answer that I used to say a few years ago. There were 3 reasons why most guys wouldn't be able to get to that next level. They were either clueless, they were either lazy, or they were scared. And in each of those situations, it's pretty clear like what happens when you're in that type of mode, right? When you're clueless, you don't have really the information, the knowledge, or the actual tactical strategy that you can implement to execute, right? There's also the laziness of like, and especially with the advent of online dating, right? There's this kind of paradox of accessibility that we live in today, where you kind of just don't feel that motivated to like go and actually do the thing that you need to in order for life to improve. And then there's the scared part, where it's like, well, what if I get rejected? What if she says no? What if I get laughed at? What if the bouncer comes and throws me out? What if I just get ostracized by society, excommunicated, banned, never to return again? You know what I mean? Like our minds go that deep. And so that was like the answer that I would give. Today, being clueless is, I guess people can say that they're clueless. It's very difficult today with the amount of information that's accessible to us, whether it's free or there's a paywall. The information is available to everyone when it comes to the basics of communication, right, and relationship building. If you want more, the chances are there's a paywall there, and you do have to invest in yourself to get access to that. But at that aside, it comes down to, I believe, laziness and being scared, which you have to choose one, right? The more I tend to see that with my clients, like the more options you give someone, the more outs they have. Right. And so when you just give them 2 and it creates this very binary decision, then it's easier to find the solution. So, for example, if you're lazy, chances are you just need to be motivated, right? Someone needs to challenge you to move, right? So hiring an expert or creating some type of like betting plan with your friends or being dared or anything like that gives you that motivation. But if you're scared, this is where you need to challenge yourself, right? That's the internal part where you just have to push yourself through the threshold. And the last thing I'll say about that, because the scared is really interesting. We get scared more times based on simulated events that occur in our mind than actually what has happened in our lives. So our mind has an ability to assess a situation and simulate what could happen if I were to do X. And typically our mindsets, based on our attitude or just our general mood, will choose to find all the simulations that lead to failure, right? And so we do it so much that we feel like we know what failure is like. We understand failure and we get comfortable with failure. And then we try to figure out, well, how do we respond to failure? And so it becomes this like weird comfort that we have with failure that we haven't experienced yet, which is really interesting. But oftentimes when it comes to things that we really want, such as a promotion or asking someone out on a date or standing up for something you believe in, saying a value that you share is not in alignment with mine, or maybe seeing activity that your friends are doing and saying, I'm not about that. We don't think about what would happen, or at least we don't run enough simulations in our mind of what would happen if we were successful. So oftentimes, even if we were to go into situations and stumble upon some luck, and all of a sudden, for example, if you approach someone and she's like very excited as if she was waiting for you to say something, a lot of guys falter because they weren't prepared for what would happen if they were successful. They were just counting on failure from the beginning, right? So the being scared part is really just about going to doing not only internal work of like becoming comfortable with the fear, understanding what your body does, and having some mental rewiring around the stories around what you're pursuing and why you think is holding you back, but also, like you said, reps, right? You got to have experience to really get the proper data to know what to do to make that data get better. So I'll shut up now because I said a lot, but I just wanted to really be thorough in that answer.
That was amazing. Yeah. What I like to say is some brain just life blocks. Like life block. And are you trying to life block me, brain?
Yeah.
All right, I see you. Thanks so much for trying to keep me safe. I appreciate you. Come here. You're scared. I understand. You're trying to keep me safe. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right? Like our ego. Here's the thing about failure. Our mind, like when we're in a situation where it's fight, flight, or freeze, right? Like our body doesn't know the difference in like the chemical makeup that goes on in our body, like physiologically. So we don't want to fail, but we also don't want to die, right? Like as humans, like we don't want to die. Our brain doesn't know the difference between failure and death. So anytime we experience even a moment of like failure, it's basically death. Death of many things. But typically, in most of these cases, it's the death of the ego. The ego doesn't want to die, right? And so the one thing I always tell my clients, especially today, is to have what you haven't had before, you're going to have to do something you've never done. And in that moment is when you die and become reborn again. It has to happen. Or else,
wow.
Yeah. And so, yeah.
That was the quote, Jeremy.
I'm taking notes. I'm taking notes right now. Say it again. To have
what you've never had before, you have to do something you've never done before. And it's in that moment.
To do something you've never had before. I love that.
Yeah. To have what you've never had before, you have to do something you've never done before.
You have a question, Kyle?
Yeah, I resonate a lot with
felt it
lately. Because with the scared aspect, and so you said it's kind of reprogramming your mind a little bit. For me recently, I don't know if you've ever heard of Tim Ferriss's TED Talk where he talks about fear setting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's something that I recently did. I wonder, because I know we've talked about reps and kind of putting your thoughts out on paper and kind of going through that whole process. Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that you recommend people do to kind of help reprogram that kind of fear setting in your brain?
Yeah, so the reps are physical. The reps provide physical evidence, right? Like it provides you like facts, and you can't argue facts. You can only analyze them, right? But you can't argue what actually happens because events that happen in our lives are neutral. Our attitudes determine whether they're positive or negative. But just like our minds we've trained our minds to simulate hundreds of thousands, if not millions of simulations are based on failure. We can start doing the same thing around success. Right. And I've actually wrote an article that was published, I think it was last month in Entrepreneur. And it literally says, like, if you really want success, stop thinking failure. Right. Like all of your thoughts and stories need to go from, well, if I fail to when I succeed, because that will mentally put you in position to start thinking of like, okay, like when this happens, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to feel. This is what I'm going to experience in those moments. So it actually is something that we can start simulating. We think that's fantasy, right? Like how our attitudes make us feel like when we're trying to simulate success, that we think that we're dreaming, or we might even be told this, right? Maybe goals that we all have here as men, and we're expressing this out loud. People might be thinking, "Oh, you're dreaming," or "That'll never happen," or "You're living in fantasy." Well, all those simulations that you did trying to prepare yourself for failure was also fantasy because it never happened. So if we're going to give ourselves the ability to do that, we should clearly give ourselves the ability to quote unquote fantasize over what we would do when we're successful. Because that's really what we're aiming for. That's really where our energy should go.
Let's just let's just bring this back to the situation right now.
Yeah.
So we had a guest scheduled. They ghosted us, and I decided to be random and put in the group chat of whatever amount of men who's down to be on the self-improvement podcast in the next 10 minutes. there was a fear I had that people were going to think I was, I was going to be judged, I don't know, all this stuff, right? So what prevents someone from doing something like that? And then look, bam, you popped up and it worked out so perfectly. This is awesome, actually.
Yeah. And so here's what happened in your case, right? And this is something that, Kyle, to answer your question even more, is another way to kind of do the rewiring is so often we are so committed to what things look like in the process of the desired outcome that we want. And we become so much so that we actually end up becoming more committed to what the journey looks like than the actual outcome. So in your case, Jeremy, like you were committed to having a guest here on this show, and it didn't matter what it looked like. And you trusted that, right? You put all your energy and the commitment to the outcome that we're all experiencing right now. But if you're committed to what it looks like, which in previous the case was this other person being on the show, you probably would have been much more relentless in reaching out to this person, texting them, emailing them, wondering why, like they weren't, kind of perseverating over like why they're not being responsive, where they can't, maybe I can find like their Facebook friend and find out where they're at. You know what I mean? Like we would kind of dive deep in trying to create that particular outcome and what that looked like. That's a different outcome than just wanting someone on the show. That's the outcome of wanting that person on this show today. Right? See the difference? It's a huge difference. It's actually a subtle difference, but it makes a huge difference, right? Because we can, for example, bring it back to like any type of relationship, whether it's with money, ourselves, weight, spirituality, women. It's like, I'm committed to being a better version of myself. But if you're committed to what that looks like, chances are you're going to find a lot more challenge and struggle because you're being so specific in the wrong ways. As opposed to saying like, I want to be in a quality relationship with an amazingly attractive, compatible, social, outgoing woman. But then you might meet her and say, well, she doesn't have like, this particular quality or I'm meeting her in a very weird way or whatever. Enter any excuse. I like to use the Jerry Seinfeld excuse because he always found an excuse for every woman that he was dating. Ironically, George Costanza, on the other hand, was the only character in the show that had the longest relationship with someone who was completely out of his league. There's a reason for that, right? It was a commitment to wanting to be in a relationship with an amazing person as opposed to who that person was. So it's subtle but huge.
That's interesting. So I don't think I've ever heard it phrased like that, like kind of visualizing too detailed on things. Can you explain that a little more? Honestly, I'm a little, I don't want to say confused or lost, but
yeah,
I'd just like to hear a little bit more on that because I'm very interested in that.
Totally. So, for example, like when I ask my clients and I ask them like, well, what do you want out of love? They'll say, well, I want to be in a relationship. I'm like, what kind of relationship? And typically most guys would answer with like the type of woman that they want inside the relationship, right? Like that's the commitment to what it looks like. But when I ask them like, well, what do you want to experience in the relationship, right? Like, what do you want to actually feel in the relationship? Well, they say, well, I want to feel support. I want to feel sexiness. I want to feel fun, adventurous, passion. Well, that's where you should be looking, right? You want a sexy, fun, adventurous, supportive relationship. That's what you want, But when you let go of what that particular person, what that looks like in terms of how you get that, how that comes into your life, now it starts to open up a world of opportunities, and now you're able to see where the potential can come from all avenues, not just one specific avenue, right? It would be the comparison of saying like, to kind of really simplify the example even more, it would just be saying like, and I hear this a lot from clients, like, especially now with COVID, a lot of guys will say, well, I'm not going to deal with dating anymore because I can't go on dates, right? I can't meet the women in person. And that's just like, just because you can't necessarily get together and meet with them physically doesn't mean that the entire process of dating is broken, right? Like you could still message people. You can still connect with them. You can go on virtual dates. Like more women are now amenable to FaceTime dates and Zoom dates and like other types of ways that they can interact because they're committed to connection, not what it looks like. Right. But guys, in our mind, we tend to do this. We're like, well, I'm just going to wait until this all passes over. First of all, you don't know when that time will be. And second, like, how many opportunities are you allowing yourself to miss while this is going on, when you could still be working on creating your skill set, first of all, but also creating potential relationships that when this restriction is lifted, the first day you're probably going to be meeting one of those women because they'll be excited to see you at that moment, as opposed to starting that process then. Right. And so these are the subtle ways that we we trick ourselves into not doing what we know we can do because of where our commitment stands.
So this is we put up excuses and to not do work, it sounds like.
Yeah.
However that looks. Like, this makes me think of, so I don't know if you know, my Instagram's Jeremy Talks to Strangers. And sometimes I'll do these like social challenges where I'm like, hey, any strangers down, have a quick 10-minute phone conversation. And I just commit to the connection. I don't commit to like, we got to collaborate on this. I got to get something from them. You know, I don't commit to that. I just commit to the connection for 10 minutes. I don't care how it looks. Right. Yeah. And I notice in those situations, those are the best connections I make.
Yeah.
Some of the best podcast guests I've had are from that challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's how life works. It's how life works. It's, you know, where your energy goes is where results show. Like, that's really how it works, you know? And so if your energy is in something that's not really going to serve you and then not leading to like really the higher purpose, then it's not going to show up, or it's going to be a very, very challenging time for you to get there. I'm all about this, you know, as smooth of a ride as possible. And I prefer people to not experience unhappiness on their journey to happiness, you know, but we tend to set ourselves up to do that ride because of where our commitment and our energy lies, based on programs, stories that we tell ourselves or we're told.
I say it all the time. Story I tell myself, the story I'm telling myself.
Yeah.
Brene Brown talks about that. It's a story I tell myself.
Mm-hmm.
Just because of the viewpoints and just the programming that each person has. Like, two people can see a situation completely different.
Yeah, totally.
Like, I think that's the biggest fights happen, because they're like, it's this way. No, this way. So if you're if like saying a fight in a relationship, the person's like, it's this way. It's this way. If they say it's this way, you're basically telling this person you're wrong for feeling these emotions and seeing like, it's just like this crazy disconnect, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's like, all feelings are valid. Like, you feel the way you do, and like, you're valid in feeling that way. And it's okay if my story doesn't align with your story. And all stories are created from experiences, right? From events that happen in people's lives. Some of the stories that we have in our minds, you know, in our belief system, are based on events that we've experienced or someone else experienced, right? And like, these stories then dictate our feelings, and then those feelings are what inspires the subsequent behavior, right? But like, we don't really think about it in that way. Like, all of our behavior is not inspired necessarily by our feelings. They're actually inspired by our stories, our thoughts, you know? The feeling is really the energy that goes into the behavior, but that's not the source of our behavior. The story that's formed is actually, it's something that I actually learned with my therapist. He taught me this because it's a cognitive behavioral technique. So that's, again, one of these things where we talk about reprogramming. It's a cycle: thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And so our mind has an ability to generate a lot of what I call thought errors, right? These are things that are completely not true, but our mind convinces us that they are, right? And then once we're able to catch these things, then we have an opportunity to change the story, right? Once we're able to disprove the original thought, then we can change the story. And inside there, that's when the gift starts to form, right? You get like and this is what I teach my clients, because for me, it's all about creating magic, right? Like I use a video game overlay as a means for transformation. So I talk about health points, doing things that can increase your health points. I talk about magic points, where you can find gifts in any event. Usually those events are the ones that trigger you, right? Because when you get triggered, those are the stories that come up. But then most importantly, like, your experience points, which is ultimately like your level of fulfillment, right? And so the magic is really what accelerates people's development and transformation, is your ability to go into events that trigger you, find what's going on, what's the rooted story that's causing you to behave or react to this particular event, and see, like, is this actually true? And if it's not true, even if there's one piece of evidence that disproves it, that means that that story is not true, and gives you an opportunity to create a new story that you can live now going forward with. And then inside of that, there's always a lesson that you can grab and carry with you, which allows you to leave the event of the past in the past, but carry the gift with you well into the future. And that's really powerful. That's I see this alchemy in our ability to create that at any moment as humans, not let alone just men.
Oh, you speak my language. I always say this, like when someone's in a really awful mood and they're going through rejection or whatever it is and they're triggered, that's an opportunity to process some stuff that was hiding in their consciousness. It's like there's some trauma, there's some sadness, there's some anger that's just like hiding somewhere in the body when you're happy, and it's not going to come out when you're happy. But as soon as you're triggered, it's coming to the surface. It's now like all that trauma is uncovered. The rug was, your psychological rug was covering it all up. And now that you're triggered, boom, it's free to be processed. This is an opportunity.
Yeah.
I love that.
Huge opportunity. And like, I mean, I know for me personally, like it was years ago where I started to feel things that I wasn't familiar with, as I was taking on more responsibility in my life and in my business. And my business was, at the peak of the professional wingman, I mean, I was known around the world, and I was flying every weekend to different cities around the country, helping guys find love. Meanwhile, I found my love, and we were engaged, and we eventually got married, and I now have a 3-year-old daughter. And as those responsibilities continued to level up, not only was more being asked of me, I was asking of myself more, and I didn't understand why I was feeling the way I did. And because I didn't have any tools to process them, I resorted to suppressing them or ignoring them or numbing myself, right? So for me, it was like going out on benders and drinking and doing drugs and like not, and hiding, right? Escaping in public is what I like to call it. I used to hide in public all the time. And literally just allow my armor to be the shell of my identity at the time, which was like the wingman, right? But like, I didn't let people in to really get to know me. And it wasn't until I started to learn these things and get help from, my therapist and hiring a coach, that it opened up these new tools to me that I get to now use. These, just the magic that I call it the MP. So you get magic points, but there's a journal technique that I use I offer my clients. Just doing the journal every day allowed me to transform my life into warp speed, because it allowed, like you said, Jeremy, for my feelings to actually have a place and to exist and to be validated and to say, kind of do it like you said, like you were hugging the ego, like allowing those moments to take place to say, I get it, man. I get it. I know you're scared. I know you're freaking out. I know you're throwing a tantrum right now, and everything will be okay. But this is not how we get to show up in our lives, right? So, because I'll tell you, like my life up until a few years ago, if you think about, the many parts of you as like a boardroom, right? Like
parts work,
right?
Parts work. I went to an entire retreat on this in the forest about parts work.
Yeah, so you get it, right? It's like
I'll hear you say it.
Yeah, there's many parts of you, and imagine in your mind or in your soul, wherever this room exists, you're having this boardroom meeting. For many, many years, my ego, right, was the one who was at the head of the table. He was also the one that was throwing the most tantrums. He was also the one plaguing all the other parts of my life. He was also the other one just like total sabotage, kamikaze, like, you're trying to kill me. Well, we're all going down in this shit together. Kind of, that was his attitude, right? And at first, because I didn't have the tools, I was trying to like destroy my ego. Like, get the fuck out of this room. You don't belong here. Like shaming, right? And this is like a key part of me, right? And like you said, like it's designed to protect me, right? Like ego actually loves me. In some weird, twisted way, it actually loves me. And so casting it off and like getting it out of the room was like the wrong thing to do. Like I literally, my therapist was awesome. He literally had me physically get up from where I was sitting and sit in another seat and talk to my ego. And what
voice dialogue, voice dialogue,
right?
Oh my gosh, this is awesome.
What it resulted in was giving my ego a seat at the table, just not the head of the table, right? Like, and my ego will still throw a tantrum. It'll still do shit. It'll still do whatever to get attention. And I get to acknowledge and say, I hear you, bro. I'm going to take that into consideration. All will be well, you know? And listen, it's not perfect. It's literally a daily practice. I don't get it right every time, but at least I have a tool that allows me to work on it and get better, you know, each and every day. And that's what I want everyone else to have.
Yeah, I love what you said about just give it a space, give it a spotlight. Because my first reaction when that my ego comes along or my criticizer comes along is, go away, leave me alone. You're being so mean. Go away, leave me alone. Just to get when it's like the opposite. So it's like, no, come here, sit down. I see you. Go ahead. You have the floor. What's up? And then what I learned is about this dynamic of like, what do you want for Jeremy? I want him to be safe. I want him to do this. You know, how are you doing? What are you doing to give him that? Is it working?
Yes. Right? Like, what do you want?
What do you want? Yeah. Is it working?
Yeah. Will the old story give you what you want? And if the answer is no, then what's a new story that can lead you to what you want?
Yes. Right? Like, how much does Jeremy listen to you? Love that. That's so language.
Yeah. And
then you got the guy in the middle, the sovereign, right? You control it. And then you go the other side of it. Like when you're being nice to like, how often is Jeremy listening? Oh yeah, this is good. I love this.
Yeah. It's great stuff, man. And like, another example, I'll give credit to, Garrett White. You know, he's founder of Wake Up Warrior, and he still is one of my coaches. I don't lean on him as much as I did a couple years ago when I really needed him, but he helps me a ton. And one of the things when we talk about part work, he said, you know, if you're someone who wants to be a king of your empire, there are 4 roles that you have to play, right? There's the king, there's the lord, there's the soldier, and then there's the slave, you know? And we have to play those roles. And we have to be able to understand, like, as the king, there's sometimes times where you have to do the duties of a slave, right? And vice versa, you know? And our ego gets in the way. They'll say, I'm the fucking king. I don't need to do slave work, right? But that doesn't work, you know? Because it's actually the slave work that keeps everything together. We don't realize that, but that's what keeps
everything together?
The slave work. The unsexy stuff that most people don't want to do, right? When you think about before and after pics, right? People love seeing the after pics, right? But they never want to see the work that got them there.
This right here is my table.
Yep.
As you can see, we got like the living small part of me, and then here we have the optimistic side of me, the happy side, the support, the angry part. There's the humor side. There's the victim. There's the shame part. There's a loving side. There's there's the people in my life area of the spot, and then
I love that
big, powerful, influential spot. And then you kind of just get. I love the dynamic of like, all right, what's that? You can take it a level. More than that. There's a level, above that, and that is like, all right, I see you're trying to be mean. Or could any of the people like at your table help them out?
Yeah,
these person to support them through like helping you get what you want, and that's usually the same thing, like happiness.
Yeah,
peace.
Yeah, peace, joy.
When I'm failing, I'm not very peaceful.
Yeah, you know, and you got to learn to speak to that part, right? Like, which can be challenging, right? It can be very challenging because sometimes the other parts are so loud that it could be difficult for you to like receive that and be able to cut through it. You know, I find that some of the best coaches are able to speak to the person behind the person that actually wants to be heard. You know, like it's tough. It's challenging. You know, when we are overwhelmed with like what we feel like we need to do, what we were taught to do, and then being faced with what we know we get to do deep down in our souls, you know? And so for me, that's part of why I do the work that I do now, is because someone came and talked to my soul and worked so hard and allowed me to allow my soul to show up the way that I am now, you know? And I wish someone had talked to me that way a lot sooner, because I probably wouldn't have done all the things that I did that didn't serve me. At the same time, I'm grateful those things did happen to me, because I made it to the other side, and I can now share this story and tell others who might be on this path or about to enter this path that they can also meet me here too, and they can get through it too.
That is literally what Kyle and I are about.
You know? Yeah. Voices for the voiceless, right?
You got a question, Kyle? I'm taking over.
Oh, I try to squeeze in here. So what do you tell someone that's just now learning about parts work? And, this is amazing stuff. I mean, I've learned a lot just listening to you just now. How do you get started with doing some of this stuff? I mean, I've heard you talking about journaling and, getting a coach. What's the best way to get started?
Honestly, I would say the best thing you could do is start journaling. Start writing. It doesn't need a particular structure. If you're the type that doesn't leave structure, journal. And now when I mean journal can look very different to people. For me, I have prompts that I've created that guide me through a journal. You can do stream of consciousness. You can do bullet point notes. You can do bullet points, right? You can actually use structures. I messed around with 5-minute journal before. I've done the bulletproof journal. I've done different types of techniques. So there's different techniques that are out there. It's almost like meditation, right? You can either go through a guided experience or you can try it yourself. So it doesn't matter what it looks like, but the idea is, and the intention is for you to get out your thoughts and your feelings about things that bring a lot of emotional intensity your way. And it doesn't have to always be about anger, guilt, blame, or shame, even though those are the most common things that are heavy. I also like to do a lot that's about happiness and gratitude, right? And joy and playfulness, because in there's also lessons too, because I want to keep that going. So what's happening in there that I can use to now keep that going? So whatever it is, just get in the habit of just writing it out. And then sometimes you can look back at it. Maybe you'll pinpoint some revelations. But typically what I've found is writing leads to revelation. And then something big will just come up. And all of a sudden that just kind of personifies everything that you were writing beforehand and gives you a chance to create a new story in that moment. And start looking at like, well, what part of me was thinking that? What part of me found that revelation? What part of me was feeling that way? Because it comes from some part, and I also feel like a good way to describe it is kind of the way that you mapped it out, Jeremy, which is awesome, is like the emotions that you find to identify yourself with the most tend to have its own part, right? It tends to play a strong role in your life. And so take an assessment, like what are the emotions that you tend to be feeling a lot that can be ranked as, I don't want to necessarily say positive or negative, because all feelings are constructive and productive, but maybe from a sense of lightness and heaviness, right? Like what are the heaviest feelings you feel? What are the lightest feelings that you commonly feel? And kind of start there as like your foundation of your quote unquote boardroom, and then as you write, you'll start to get a sense of like, as you're writing and kind of reliving the event that you're writing about or the feeling that you're feeling, which part is actually wanting to speak. And then you get to actually put words to that part, and that's kind of the beginning practice, as I see, of giving that part space to freely express itself. That's a good starting point.
I love it. So I just want to backtrack a little bit. How did you get into coaching and helping people with all this? How did you become a genius with all this knowledge?
I will. So there's two levels, so the first part is what most people know about the professional wingman. It started as most dating coaches do. They get like dumped or cheated on, and then they go on their fearless journey to become a man and have better relationships. That was me. And the first idea of a business, actually, I discovered in 2009 at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. I was literally at a bar. A buddy of mine saw a girl that he thought was very attractive, literally asked me to be his wingman and offered to pay for all my drinks the entire weekend if he actually got a date. And he did. And I was like, wow, like that could be pretty awesome. So I did that, thinking that I would just moonlight and I didn't realize it was become like a business that I would have for, 11 plus years now and have the impact that it's had, And so nowadays, like I've been responsible for over 300 marriages and engagements. About 45 to 50% of my clients that I've worked with, which are in the thousands, are in relationships right now. 0 divorces that I know of. And so I feel pretty good about that too. But statistically, levels of success that I can stand behind and be pretty proud of. My goal, my mission or purpose, if you will, behind the professional wingman was to just be the best at helping people find romantic connections in real time and living a very confident and prosperous life in all relationships in their life, with all things in their life, in all people. So I feel like I hit that mark. And when I hit that mark, something started to feel weird with me. And I felt lost and without purpose and direction. And that's when my behavior started to shift and become erratic, where I would go out to work with clients. And then when I was done, I'd stay out and drink more. And I would get home later. And I would just not live life with a clear purpose, and I disconnected with my fiance at the time, who's not my wife, and friends, myself, my body, and just became this process where I just continued to be lost. And then I left New York, moved to LA, thinking if I just removed myself and put myself in a new environment, that would be better. But what it actually did was it made me face myself even more, which caused me to escape more. And life just became this mess. And it's because I didn't feel like I had purpose anymore. And I was burning everything down around me, and I wasn't having fun. Like I wasn't experiencing any joy or happiness despite the things that I did have in my life. And stories started to form in my mind. And then there was one night where after an all-night bender, a couple nights ago, I went to Boston to do a professional speaking gig. And then on my way home, I fell asleep behind the wheel and got into an accident. And the officer who came on the scene immediately suspected that I was on drugs and arrested me. And ironically, like I wish I was, because then that would actually make sense. But that was one of the few nights that I wasn't. And I was like, man, like if this is how he sees me right now, then I must be this person. So I really just went deep. And then my wife, bless her heart, she came to me and she said, listen, like this is not the type of relationship that I want to be in. And those words were very key, because she didn't say she didn't want to be with me, right? She said this is not the relationship she wanted to be in. I took that as I needed to change. Something about me needed to change in order for the relationship to change. And that's the first time when I started to ask for help. I call that, for me, this is me getting the extra life, right? This is my one-up moment where I raised my hand and asked for help. And that's why I started to get therapy, hired a coach, did weekend experiences, started working out, made decisions on who I would allow to be in my life, and these decisions that turned out to be really big were actually based on simple choices that I made. For example, I decided I wasn't going to answer my phone after 10 p.m. anymore, because I knew when I did, that would lead to me going out and being around the wrong crowds and not getting back until 6, 7 o'clock, which is not what I wanted to do as a father anymore. But that then in turn led me to being able to wake up early. And then when I was able to wake up early before my wife and my daughter were awake, that gave me some time to work on myself. So I started to work out, started to meditate, started to journal, picked up a morning routine. And that gave me power to be able to handle the stuff that I was doing throughout my day. And I started to see my life really accelerate. I eventually stopped drinking. And then all of a sudden, like it was like the cap was off, right? Just completely, just crazy acceleration. But I still wasn't having fun. I felt like I was still like living out of obligation because of all the responsibilities that I accumulated over time.
Let me ask the $1 million question. So what was that aha moment that just it changed?
So I made the commitment to create fun in my life, create joy and happiness. And all roads led back to my first true love, which was video games. And I remember I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and she was like, "When's the last time you played video games?" I was like, "I don't know, like months ago." She was like, "Get off the phone. I don't care what you're doing. Go play video games right now, and then text me how you feel in an hour." And I remember the moment when I picked up the controller, and then I have an Xbox One. Turn it on. It made that little jingle, ding, you know. And the feeling that I got was just like, it was almost like I was back to being like a 9-year-old again, and just had fun, just playing whatever was on there at the time. I think I was playing like Gears of War 3 or 4, whatever. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go all in on this. I'm going to create structure around this to make sure this stays in my life, because I gave it up in my 20s based on stories that I took on from other people saying that video games are for kids. This video game is not something you do when you're running your own business. It's not productive. When the whole time, video games was the source of my peace, my joy, my creativity, my happiness. It always had me at a level of vibrational energy that like was able to sustain itself. So I decided to do was like, I'm going to enter a gaming tournament. I'm going to compete. And so I entered a gaming tournament first time for Tekken 7. So it was a fighting game. Went in, total newbie. Didn't even have like all the equipment necessary to play the game. I had asked guys I was playing against to borrow some stuff. And I ended up coming in 33rd out of 117 players. So that was really cool. But what was amazingly cool was that I had this unadulterated fun connecting, being in the experience, being present, and allowing myself to have this joy that I only dreamed of when I was a kid. And I was like, why can't my life be this way? Why can't I take this fun, this idea of a game that has always brought me joy, and apply it to all places of my life? And then that's when the rule came up. It was like getting that one up. That first one up I got in Super Mario Brothers 1, right? That was like, wow, I have an extra life. I can do more things now. I can take that leap over the pit. I can go after Koopa. I can do so much more and explore so much part of the world, because if something were to go wrong, I still have that extra life. How I behave when I have an extra life is very different than how I would if I'm on my last life. And in my life, I've realized I've been given a lot of extra lives. And so I decided, I was like, let's make life a game that people can win and have fun. Because if you're successful, but you're not happy, you're clearly playing someone else's game. You're clearly playing to fulfill someone else's purpose, not your own. Purpose comes with fun and joy, even if it's not something that you might particularly think is fun or joyful if someone else is doing it. But if they're experiencing joy and happiness, that's fulfillment, guys. And success and fulfillment can be shared. It doesn't have to be at the cost of another. You can be successful and have fulfillment. You can be fulfilled and be successful. And so I've dedicated my life, and I believe my life's work and my legacy will be teaching men how to live a life that is filled with fulfillment and success, by making all parts of your life a game you can win.
You cut off for a second. Say it again.
Oh, about making life a game you can win by having success and fulfillment come together.
Wow.
Yeah.
We have 3 previous podcast guests I would love to connect you with. Oh man, they literally they do it for a living. They purposeful play. One did a TEDx on it. Gary Ware, if you're listening, I love you. Amy, and like, this is cool. All right.
Yeah. And so, just using game design as the overlay for transformation, and then being able to create my own metrics. Like I said, I use like HP, XP, MP. I use other metrics as well. I'm able to not only create structure around how people transform, but they can also have fun, and it's measurable. People can really dial in and see how much energy they're putting in their lives. What's the capacity of their energy in a given day? If they feel tired, they can go back and see, well, what did I do in the morning that gave me the capacity? Or what did I do throughout the day that gave me the capacity to have the energy today? But we don't realize that we live a day at a time, And so what energy we start the day is not the energy we have at the end of the day. We start back at zero when we wake up. And the actions that we do, we either increase or it won't add. It doesn't necessarily take away, in my opinion. I don't think things take away from you. It just limits your ability to increase. And
let's make this real. So yesterday I had one of my happiest, most productive days in my life. And then today I was just like productive hangover. I just was in this rut most of the day and just sitting there, just didn't want to do anything.
Yeah. And that happens. You go through these ebbs and flows, man. When it was a full, like I typically quote unquote cycle. This is something that I learned actually from one of my friends who is a breathwork coach. And she says that, men have cycles too. And it comes from like an energetic and a mood place where sometimes it follows the pattern of the moon. And so for me, when it's a full moon, I tend to be lower energy, less productive. And when I become aware of it, what I do during the day may change. I might do less. I might be able to show up for less, but how I start the day never changes, right? Like that morning routine is how I have power. Now, how I use that power throughout the day is ultimately up to me, and it varies, but keeping that morning routine and making that a non-negotiable in my life has actually saved my life.
All right, hold on. This is I'm going to channel Kyle really quickly. Hold on. Kyle, what does your morning routine look like?
Yeah. So I wake up at 6:30 and I put my feet down and I close my eyes and I put my hands out and I say out loud, it's more of a whisper because my wife is still sleeping. I say, use me as you may, but give me something back. And then I don't move until I feel something in my hands. And then when I do that, I get up, I pee, I work out for 10 minutes, meditate for about 20 minutes, I journal for about 15 minutes. I bought my wife what's called a love box, which allows me to like send like cute, fun, loving messages to her that she gets to open up and read throughout the day. And it has this little heart that like flickers when there's like a new message, And so after I meditate and I do my journal, I text her, words of appreciation, gratitude, or love about her. So she gets that, it keeps me in a place of gratitude for what I have. I think about what I'm going to teach my daughter today. What experience am I going to be able to share with her today? And what kind of joy am I going to create in her life? And then I do some reading. Like I find a random piece of content, whether it's through my email or something that hits like on my notifications, and I read it. And if I find something that's revelatory, I think about it. And I wonder like, okay, how am I going to implement this in my life? And then I make a commitment to try to implement this in my life today. It's not like one of those things, well, I'll do this next week or I'll do this next month. Like I do it today. Because typically when I do that and there's momentum, there's a greater chance of it sticking around. But sometimes I'll implement something and it doesn't stick, and that's okay. That means it wasn't meant to be in my life right now. But I do that every single day to try to implement something, even if it's little, to see how it creates movement in all parts of my life. And then that's what I do every day.
I had a session with a therapist today. It's been a while since I've seen a therapist. And he's like, I have something for you. And he like puts out a journal. And I'm thinking it's like his whole thing because I just like tell him everything. And he pulls out the journal and just says, do.
Oh, and the last thing I do is I make the bed. I make my bed as like kind of that's like the fine, like, okay, now I'm ready, It's for some people it's a lot. I mean, for me, it's an hour. All that stuff takes an hour. It's not a lot of time. But it's a very, very important time. It's the most important time. And around 7:30, we have a little light in my daughter's room that turns from red to green that lets her know that like, okay, your day can start. And then she'll come out and it's like, boom, like now because I was in service to myself, now I'm in capacity to be in service to everyone else, which is so huge because that's not how I used to live. In my delinquent days, my days would start with my wife plopping my daughter onto my lap. And I was instantly in reaction mode, but I also was in instant resentment mode because then I was like, I'm giving to everyone else and what everyone else needs. But by the time night came and I had nothing to give myself, of course I was going to fucking go out and drink myself into an oblivion because that was my way of like saying, I'm going to get mine. I'm going to take care of me and get my time. And that wasn't the way to do it. So doing it in the morning puts me in better position to take care of everyone else, including being here, talking to you guys, talking to my clients, and everything else that's required of me, you know? So I'm grateful to have that.
Wow. We're grateful to have you.
I'm glad I saw the message, man. Honestly, like things like this are meant to be. So I'm always grateful.
Some of like my best stories and my best like friendships come from stuff like this.
Yeah.
Like it's like when I over plan, has to be perfect. I have all these expectations of the person. That's when it doesn't go right.
Yeah. Yeah. I was taught that expectations are premeditated resentments.
Oof.
You know? Because when you're the moment you set an expectation, the other person doesn't know. Right? So it's actually a one-sided expectation. And the moment you set an expectation, the moment they don't deliver it, which is instantaneous, right? It's like the moment that you set the expectation and they don't deliver it, the resentment starts to build, you know? And even when they do deliver, there is so much resentment that builds up that it doesn't actually have the effect that it could have if it just was given to you, right? Without the expectation there. So this is a part of, this goes back to what we were talking about before, when you're committed to the outcome, like you're committed to creating the outcome as opposed to what it looks like. That's a great example of that. Because inside of the what do you think it looks like, you have certain expectations of what it needs to be. And if it doesn't end up that way, that's when resentment comes up. And resentment can come in the form of frustration, anger, shame, blame, guilt. But when you're committed to the outcome, it doesn't matter what it looks like. You got the outcome.
But if you're committed to the outcome, isn't that an expectation?
Yeah, but that comes from a different place because the intention is different, right? The intention is more of like, I want to have this in my life, as opposed to trying to control how you get there or how it comes into your life.
Wow.
Right? Like when you're trying to focus on what it needs to look like and you're putting expectations in that process, that's you controlling. Right? Okay. But when you're just committed to the outcome and you're just like, all right, I'm just going to show up with the intention and the energy focused on the outcome, and you're going to let however it happens. Now we're talking about surrendering, right? The complete opposite of control. But you just have to be open to it. Like the opportunities can be there that can lead you to that outcome. But if you're so controlling around what it looks like, you're not going to see that opportunity as an opportunity. You're going to see that as a distraction, or that'll never get me there, or that'll never work. Right? I'm sure we've heard this plenty of times when guys would ask us, well, what do I say to her? And I'm like, bro, just go say hi. Oh, that'll never work. Right? Like that'll never work. Like what line? What do I need to say that's going to? I'm like, you have to understand, most women don't even remember the first thing you said to her. I've actually done this. Sorry, I've done this study. I would actually go up to the women after they would talk to the guy and say, hey, like my friend over there was talking to you. It seems like you had a great conversation. You remember what he said to you to start the conversation? And she'd be like, no, 9 out of 10 don't remember. Unless it was something like absurd. You know what I mean? But like most of the time they don't. They remember the last thing. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah. Anyway.
I used to do a thing where I would just smile, and I had the expectation that the expectation was I'm going to find someone who's really friendly, and I would just smile and just like wave to everyone. And then some people look at me dirty, but they didn't that's not the expectation I wanted. So I would just move on like there's nothing. And then there was that person I was like, perfectly.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Just I used to do all these things. Now they're all making sense now.
Yeah, right. Like there was a different intention. Right? Like your purpose wasn't. I mean, I don't know what it was, or you tell me. But I'm not sure if it was to make everyone smile. Right? It was more about committed to having that connection. Right? That connection, and one person gave it to you, and that fulfilled it. Right? And that's all it takes usually. You know. But once again, commitment to the outcome, not what it looked like.
Yeah, it's so funny. It plays a part in like all my stuff. Like I always talk about this, but my Jeremy Talks to Strangers project. I went to Canada and I had it in my head that I'm like, everyone is so friendly in Canada and everyone's all friendly. And then I would talk to a local and people were like, people are not that friendly in Canada. Are you joking me? Yes, they are.
Yeah.
And then I moved back to LA and I'm like, I was always saying like people in LA aren't friendly. And I'm like, they fit that expectation. So then I forced myself to be like, everyone in LA is so friendly. So then now I open up that door for the people in LA that are friendly. And I ignore the people that weren't friendly because they didn't fit my expectation.
Yeah.
Or what I wanted. Connect with people.
Yeah, it wasn't an expectation. It was more of just like what you were going to allow into your circle, right? What you were going to allow into your energy. It's not an expectation, you know?
You're right. Okay.
It's what you're allowing, right?
I love being wrong.
Yeah, it's what you're allowing. It was your own personal filter, right? That allowed it to happen. I'll give you one funny story that's actually as recent as today. So for the past, I would say 2 months, we've been having an ant problem in our house. They're scout ants. And for you guys who don't know, they're different than the carpenter ants, right? Where you can kind of see that they're full body. These scout ants are super, super tiny. And I mean, so tiny that you could squeeze them in between your fingers and they could actually go in between like the bumps in your fingerprint and not die. Like they're that tiny, right? And so, but you can see them, right? And they're scout ants. And so they send out ants to go search for food. And when they find something, they go back and then they send a whole trail after it to pass the food over to eventually their nest. So we saw them show up and I thought this was weird. And so I talked to our management company and they were like, well, they only show up when it was raining. And of course, it was raining. I was like, all right, cool. We'll give it a few days. They weren't going away. And so I started to get really frustrated because I just have a sensitivity to insects being indoors where they shouldn't be. And so I would look up different solutions. You know, having a daughter, we don't want anything toxic in our place. And so we're doing natural, like essential oils, and we'd spray with vinegar and water and kind of wipe the ants away. And then we would put like peppermint and water and spray in their place so to kind of get rid of the pheromones that they would leave behind. So that everyone else could follow their trail. So we tried to destroy their trail. They kept coming back, and then more and more and more. I was getting frustrated during COVID. Like our management company wasn't like so willing to let someone into the house unless it was for an emergency purpose. And they considered this an inconvenience, which I'm not really sure how that works. Anyways, it got to a point where like these things were getting into all of our living spaces, and I was like, enough's enough, you know? So did some research, talked to a few people, sent a very scathing email and got someone to come into the house today, which is great. Now, what's interesting about this was I kept on wiping away the pheromones and like wanting to get rid of these ants so bad that I wasn't really understanding how the process was going to work for them to get rid of them. And so I was talking to my father-in-law and he was like, hey, get these ant traps. And these ant traps will have like these like sweet they love sweet things. And they love grease, and they would like put things in these traps. And what they would do is they would take it and bring it to their nest, and they would kill the ants in the nest or whatever. One thing that he did tell, I remember him telling me this, but I ignored it, was that when you put these down, it's going to work immediately. So you're going to see more ants before you see less. In my mind, I did not want to hear that because I didn't want to see more ants. I was tired of seeing more ants. So I would go and I would see all these ants, not realizing that it was working, that what he was saying was working. And I went on this whole like tirade of just like wiping. I went into the store and got like pet and child-friendly like Raid and sprayed and mopped the floor in it. And now it's like leaves its residue. So like our place is slippery. My daughter is sliding all over the place. Finally, the guy comes today, right? So now fast forward, the guy comes today and he's like, all right, I'm going to put this topical solution here. It's non-toxic, so you can stay in the house. Just so you know, you're going to see a lot more ants show up in the house. And they're going to go away, but you have to wait it out. And I was like, you mean be patient? He's like, yes. Right? And it was, and sure enough, this morning,
yeah,
I was writing in my journal about my magic moment, and I'll share with you guys. I'll pull it up just so you guys can, for the sake of transparency, because this is very important how amazing life works in this way. All I wrote a gratitude journal about the apartment. And the lesson, I won't go through the whole thing. But yeah, let me see. Yeah, so the revelation for me was like the idea of not being able to eat chips for 90 days, which I did like a quarter ago, was clearly an impossible feat. Where I am now was once impossible. Just because it's my normal now doesn't make it normal. I still get to appreciate the significance of where I'm at today. Playing video games and competing was just an impossible dream until it became a reality. Now winning is what's possible for me. An entirely new business where I can deliver results, impossible, but I'm doing it. One of the things I learned in video games was the reason why I was losing was because I wasn't patient. And every time I chose to be patient, I won every match to a point where I was winning upwards of 10, 11 straight. If I choose to be patient in other parts of my life, especially in business and inside this apartment, everything will work out the way it's supposed to. I wrote this morning. This morning before my day started. And wow. every experience that I've had today has been revolved around this lesson around patience. And now I'm sure there's like 10,000 ants in the kitchen area of my apartment. And I have the faith that being patient, they're not doing anything. They're just like in the corners or whatever. They're not like getting around or anything. But I have the patience that they'll go away. And if I don't force it and control it, I'll be okay.
There's another element to this that I really love, and that's in growth, especially. Like I see it in my clients, so I have them go up to people and they actually feel more anxiety at first. So then their brain says, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. It made me think of that.
Yeah.
Hold on, no, it's not bad. Like that means you're doing it right. Like just because you're feeling uncomfortable and like your brain's saying, doesn't mean it's bad. Your brain sometimes will label it as bad. That means you're on the right path a lot of the times.
Yeah. So think of this as like, now going back to the boardroom, right? Like me wiping and being aggressive and wiping and like tell my family to leave the house for a couple hours while I spray the place. That was my ego throwing a tantrum, right? The ants they're not the problem in this case. I was the problem. I didn't accept what needed to be done and the nature in which this process had to work in order for both the ants and myself to be comfortable. In this case, the ants being outside and me being able to live inside comfortably, right? And so when I see experiences like those, I never think of it outside of me. I always bring it back to myself. Like what was here for me that I needed to learn that I now get to carry out in all parts of my life? And in this case, it was like when something doesn't look like it's working, it might actually be working. Take a second look, be patient, wait and see how things might play out. And I get to look at that in other parts of my life. And I also get to challenge my clients, right? You guys listening to this, you guys get to hear that, right? Like when things don't look like they're working, maybe they are working. Maybe a little bit of patience can allow you to see it play out for you to really, really know. Like, where is that missing from your life? You know, stuff like this is just beautiful. I get to share with you guys.
Yeah, things weren't working with our podcast and a little patience. Thomas showed up.
Yeah, man.
Cool. Kyle, you want to ask your question you asked everyone?
Yes. So yeah, we ask everybody this. So what's the one message you would want to share with the entire world?
It's clear. I've said it before. I want everyone to live life like they were just given a second one. You get an opportunity to do something different in your life right now. The choice is yours. Happiness is your choice, not someone else's, not something else's. You know, it is your responsibility to create that outcome. You will be successful. That is a given. If you doing will allow you to be successful, but being is what will allow you to be happy. And the two can coexist. So live life like you were given a second one.
Love it. So where can people find you if they want to kind of check you out? Are you on Instagram or we really don't know because we just texted?
I know, just me. I love it. There's many ways. If you want to know about dating specific, the professional wingman, you can go to professionalwingman.com. If you want to know more about the 1-Up rule and how I make life a game you can win, using that video game design as a source of transformation, you can go to thomasedwardsjr.com. And then I'm on most social media as Thomas H. Edwards Jr. You can find me on the gram, Facebook, Twitter, all the things. Oh, and Twitch. If you're a gamer, you can find me. I'm Too Reckless on Twitch.
That's the first Twitch shout out we've ever got.
I'm sure you got gamers listening to this, watching this. So shout out.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, there it is on the gram.
All right. Well, there you heard it. Everybody go check out Thomas, and we will see y'all next week.